Good evening, we are Group 3 and we would like to let you know that we think the concept of ultra-processed foods has to inform dietary guidelines. The goal of the dietary guidelines is to promote health and prevent chronic disease. And what they advise is a balanced diet rich in vegetables, fruits, whole grains and lean proteins, typically aiming for at least 5 servings of fruit and fats daily. From literature, we see that ultra-processed foods are associated with chronic disease. Therefore, the guidelines should also incorporate advice on ultra-processed foods. So, the NOVA classification system of the food products is based on the industrial processing they undergo. And the NOVA has 4 groups classified, and these are unprocessed or minimally processed foods, or processed culinary ingredients, processed foods and ultra-processed foods. Ultra-processed foods are usually convenient, tasteful and affordable products. They're designed to be consumed anytime and anywhere. But they also often have a high concentration of salt, sugar and fat, and that's usually much higher than in processed foods. Some examples are sweet or savory packages, snacks, confectioneries, breakfast cereals, milk drinks and fruit drinks, and soft drinks, both the regular and the diet version. So, as you saw before, there is a strong association between ultra-processed foods and chronic disease. And for the major UPF components, so the processed meat, you can see a higher risk of type 2 diabetes and some cancer types. For the sugar-sweetened beverages, we can see also a higher risk of diabetes type 2 and also a higher risk of ischemic heart disease. And for the trans fatty acids, we see also a risk or an association with risk of heart disease. So it is quite serious chronic diseases that are associated with the UPFs. So the NOVA classification system was found in 2010, but since in 2014 it was the first time that dietary guidelines with the recommendation based on NOVA food groups was launched. And since then more and more guidelines base the recommendations on NOVA food groups. And in those recommendations, the overall golden rule is always to prefer unprocessed or minimally processed foods and freshly made meals to ultra-processed foods. So in conclusion, you could say that ultra-processed foods consumption is associated with poor dietary quality and chronic disease. And the goals of the dietary guidelines was and is still to promote health and prevent chronic disease. So therefore, we think that the advice about UPFs should be incorporated in the dietary guidelines. So on this slide you see a schedule of how the potential mechanisms are, how UPFs can contribute to adverse health outcomes. For the dietary guidelines, it is recommended that it's supported by evidence. And so far there is evidence that it is important to reduce processed meat consumption, to limit sugar-sweetened beverages, to eliminate or strongly reduce industrial trans fatty acids. It is important to strengthen the food labeling, and it is important to have a good consumer education, so people know why they have to do or don't do certain things, and why it is important, and use dietary guidance that reflects both nutrition and processing. So it is important that people know why some foods are good and why some are better to avoid. So they should translate evidence into practical population level action. So a balanced interpretation is important. We know that the concern is justified because the evidence linking the key ultra-processed foods components to chronic disease is growing, and the biological mechanisms are increasingly plausible. An updated meta-regression strengthens confidence in risk assessment, and public health guidance can target the most harmful components. But we still need to assess it carefully, because UPF category is heterogeneous. Not all processed foods have the same health profile, and some processes improve the food safety, which of course is also a very important thing to think about. And research on whole UPF categories remains complex, and sometimes it is controversial because it's not always 100% clear that the UPF is the part that is a risk. And benefits and drawbacks should be considered within sustainable nutrition strategies. So in the dietary guidelines, the advice on UPFs can be given in 3 ways. So you can specifically refer to ultra-processed foods or ultra-processing to talk about the UPFs. You can just say that you can just discourage the specific ultra-processed foods, or you can refer to the characteristics that imply the presence of or absence of ultra-processing. So the take-home messages are that ultra-processed foods are a major feature of modern diets and a growing public health issue. The updated evidence supports reducing processed meat, sugar-sweetened beverages, and trans fatty acids. Health effects likely involve multiple pathways, including inflammation, adiposity, and gut microbiome changes. Future progress depends on rigorous evidence and coordinated policy action. But the main message is: update dietary guidelines using careful evidence on the most harmful ultra-processed foods components. And here are the references for if you want to read more about this subject.